Is everybody in? Is everybody in? The show is about to begin.
Welcome to the podcast, concerts that made us, interviews and stories, tales from the bus. We love taking you back to when it all went down, the greatest live shows and that cheering crowd sound. It's concerts that made us, concertsthatmadeus.com.
JD Simo, you're very welcome to Concerts That Made Us.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm very excited to get chatting to you now. We opened the show with your track "Mortgage on My Soul." It's off your album "Songs from the House of Greece," which you released on the 13th of January. Can you tell us a bit about the track?
Sure. It's the words at least are an old Mississippi Fred McDowell song, and I always really dug the words. And gentleman I've been lucky to work with for a long time, Adam Abrashoff, who is a magnificent world-class drummer. He really is a huge fan of Tony Allen and Fela Kuti, and oftentimes we'll play these beats that are just disgustingly great. And so he was playing that. He played that and just sort of superimposed the Fred McDowell tune over the top of it. And it's just really something that I enjoy playing. I don't really get sick of it. It's we usually open the shows with it. And yeah, it's definitely one of my favorite things. So
Yeah, I can. You can really hear that come across on the track. It sounds. I thought to myself anyway, God, I'd love to hear him play it live because I'd say he has one hell of a time with it. You know.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And the album.
Thank you.
The album contains covers of songs by John Coltrane, Blind Alfred Reed, Mississippi Fred McDowell, and a free jazz take on your own track, Higher Plane. How did you come up with the concept for the album, and what made you decide on them songs?
Well, there was no concept. I wasn't even planning on making a record. My life is sort of split between going out in little bursts and doing shows of my own, and then coming back here to Nashville and playing and working on other people's records and films and such. And so there was a break in between two little bursts of touring last year. And there was like Mortgage on My Soul was one of the songs, and the different take on Higher Plane were two things in particular that I just wanted to record because I was really enjoying playing them. And so I just asked that Adam, who I already mentioned, and Todd Bolden was a really good friend of mine who plays at Raylan Baxter and Elizabeth Cook, a bunch of other really talented people. I asked them when we were home in this little spurt if they would mind coming over here to my studio and just to cut those and maybe some other stuff just very casually. And so we just got together and had lunch, and we cut those. And then the other tracks were just, well, we're here. What do you want to do now? Oh, let's do that, and it was incredibly it was very loose, it was just kind of hanging out. There wasn't really a concept. And so I didn't know if I was going to use the stuff or maybe use one or two of them or something. And, but I played, after the fact, I sent it to my team of people that I work with, and they all seemed to agree that it should, as a collection of songs, be my next record. And, I saw it through their eyes. I was like, well, yeah, I guess that would be cool, and and that's it. It was just amusing myself, having fun, playing with guys that we'd played a lot together, and it's as a consequence of it, like records, whether it's my records or records I'm working on for other people, sometimes the quote unquote concept can be a debilitating factor to the task at hand. And I certainly, at least with the records that I'm connected to, that are mine, I think that in this case, it's actually kind of refreshing because it's for all intents and purposes, it's more of a jazz album, essentially an approach, just because it's about the performances. The performances are very loose and open, and there's really no production to speak of. It's just, there's ambient miking, and it's just us playing the collection of material, and that's something that I've hinted at and done at different points, but to totally commit to that as that's what this record is, I think is probably fortuitous, at least, of showcasing my prowess on my instrument, I suppose. And I'm very happy with it. So anyway, sorry for the long-winded answer.
No, it's good. It's good. And doing a record where you kind of capture the essence of jazz, I suppose, does it kind of give you an itch to continue to make records in such a way?
Oh, sure. It's even influencing sort of how I'm going to be touring for this next year, because it's sort of, for all intents and purposes, I've always kind of played, like rock rooms, or something, if you will, and now I'm actually getting offers to play like listening rooms, and in some cases like the Iridium in New York City, or there's a couple others, actual jazz rooms. And so, not that I'm necessarily a jazz player, but it's kind of got me rethinking a lot of sort of the ethos of what I do. Of that, there's a lot of musical genres that I work in, whether it's Americana music, or certainly blues and psychedelic music and folk music and country music and bluegrass, and a little bit in the jazz world, and Americana world, and so on and so forth. And so trying to actually kind of commit to a 2-set format live, of where I'm just going to do a little bit of all of it, so yeah, it's definitely not only influencing future projects recording wise, but even live.
Yeah. And what was the reaction like when the record dropped? It's been out just about coming up on the month mark. There must have been a fairly good reaction.
I've been very surprised, actually, because I certainly, I mean, I've done this. I've done more interviews than I've ever done, which is interesting, and also, like, streaming numbers are way above what they've ever been for me, and also the sort of like, I just went and did a taping at Sirius XM radio studios in Washington, D.C. here. And, I taped stuff for the blues channel, the jazz channel, the Americana channel, the Elvis channel, like, the Grateful Dead channel. Like, it's been wonderful. And fairly unexpected,
Yeah.
so I'm just grateful. it's been the easiest project I've ever been involved in.
Great, great. Now let's jump back to the summer of 2018. You were coming home
Mhm.
from tour. You got a
Yeah.
call, which I'm sure it'd be like the equivalent of winning the lotto for musicians. Can you tell us a bit about it?
Sure. I was in, yeah, we were coming home, and I was going to be home for a week or so. And I got from Dave Cobb, who at the time was a friend, but we'd never worked together. Now we've worked together a lot. Um, Dave, yeah, he just called me, and so that was not that odd to get a call from a friend. And he was like, "Hey, man, I'm working on this Elvis movie. Are you available such and such, to come and play some guitar?" And luckily I was, which was great. And he said, he didn't really speak much more about the whole schematics of it, but he said, obviously I'm going to need you to be able to do Scotty Moore and James Burton and some of the, the 60s stuff like Tommy Tedesco and the Wrecking Crew did, and Reggie Young did, in the Memphis sessions and stuff. But he's like, but there's all this other stuff that we're going to do, because there's a lot of period music. That's what he said, he's like, I know it's right up your alley. He's like, there's like, 50s country music. There's scenes with Sister Rosetta Thorpe. There's scenes with BB King. There's scenes with, and he's like, we need to cover all of that, as well as like all the incidental music that'll be like of the period. And I said, yeah, that sounds great. And so yeah, we started work, and then it I didn't know who Baz Luhrmann was, which was kind of a blessing. Which was kind of a blessing, because I walked in not kind of realizing the magnitude of what I was stepping into. And it was a wonderful experience. We worked for over 2 years on the film, and we recorded just tons and tons and tons of music. Everything that's in the film is one thing, but there's a lot that we did that isn't in the film. So, I mean, it was a long project, and it was really interesting, and I'm incredibly grateful to have, been part of a relatively small team, because, it was me and three other gentlemen that basically did everything. And then it was augmented at different times. There's maybe another dozen or so musicians that were in and out. But the core team was just myself and three other fellas, and Dave. And it was amazing.
Yeah, I could imagine. Geez. And you were obviously, well aware and familiar of the likes of Scotty Moore, James Burton, and the other guitarists. But how did you go about preparing and, kind of emulating their sound?
Well, I mean, we would get, before each block of sessions, we would usually work in like 3 or 4 day blocks, and it would be booked months ahead of time. And usually before those blocks, we would get notes from Baz of like what was to be accomplished in that block of sessions. And so you could kind of, he knew what he wanted, and in most cases knew specifically what songs he wanted. And so you could do your homework. And then we spent a lot of time sort of crafting, and it wasn't just me, it was the entire recording process. Regardless of what we were doing, every element of it was going to be authentic, down to the microphones we were using, to in some cases the console and tape machines and stuff that we were using, let alone our own personal instruments that we were using. And it was right up my alley. I love, Dave is that way too. Dave Cobb is that way too. We love poring over old pictures to see how things were recorded, how things were mic'd, what people were using. And then the actual playing itself was just trying to, get the proper vibe, in particular, like the Louisiana Hayride portion, we had source material. We had recordings of Elvis and the Blue Moon Boys that I'd never heard, and I'm a lifelong Elvis fan, but it was actual radio broadcasts of the Louisiana Hayride. And the thing that was really interesting is it was faster than the actual records, and it was more distorted and kind of punk rock sounding.
Right.
Okay. Because everything's really distorted and it was faster and the energy is more manic, so it was like trying to not make it sound like the record, but like make it invoke the energy of that, which was great fun. And, every little piece of music that we did that had a source material was treated the same way, like we certainly weren't rushing, and we certainly had, with the aid of Baz and his power and the extreme privilege of riches of Warner Brothers, we were able to really, really, really get it right.
Yeah.
So,
and I imagine Baz is obviously a great guy to work with. How much input were you given? Were you kind of given a little bit of free roam to do what you wanted, or was it very kind of stick to the script? This is what you need to accomplish.
Well, I mean, everything was very specific, because it has to be. But that being said, Baz, it's just like any other big project I've ever worked on, or any other big artist I've worked with. You surround yourself with incredibly competent, talented people, and you let them do what they're good at. And you sort of, like Baz just sort of drove this monumentally huge ship, but like everybody had their things that they had to do. And, I can only speak for myself that it's like, I would, if anything, over prepare with minutia, which Baz and Elliot, his second in command, especially Elliot, because Elliot was very hands-on with us and Dave in particular. Like Baz was there a lot, and Baz would certainly interject and certainly direct things, sometimes more than others. But Elliot was really kind of in the nuts and bolts with us in the trench, and Elliot loved it. He was just like, man, as much detail as you can bring to every facet of this, you please, like, don't hesitate, like whatever you want to do to try. And there were times where that was necessary. Like I remember when we were working on the BB King stuff, and now the stuff that's in the film is like, we did much more stuff than is in the film. And there's actually other artists that we recorded stuff to that didn't make it in the film even. But it was like, I remember with BB King, I was very vocal about like, well, listen, like the world has this image of BB King, but it's a later version of BB King. We're saying that this is taking place in 1955, 1956. It needs to sound and have the production stylings of him in that era, which is an era that is not as, it's 8 years before Live at the Regal, or 13 years before Live at Cook County Jail or something. It's like, we cannot assimilate and make it sound like the wrong era. And so some of that was instrumentation. Some of that was what I personally was like, BB played different in the 50s as opposed to the early 60s even. And so that's where it's like the little minutia of stuff, like, that's why you're there. You're there to do, you're there to call that kind of stuff to attention and make sure it's addressed and done properly,
Yeah.
So that's just one example though.
Yeah. And what is it actually like working on a movie of that scale? You know, it's obviously when you're working on an Elvis Presley biopic, you know it's not going to be a small movie. It's going to probably be the biggest movie of the year, you know? And I imagine it could almost consume your entire life. What was it actually like?
Well, I mean, for the times that we were working, it certainly consumed everything. But like I said, we would do it in spurts. You know, it's like we would do 3 or 4 days, or maybe as much as I think, you know, maybe there we would do a week, maybe, or 5 days or something. And then there'd be a couple of months where they would go off and do their movie stuff, and then we'd reconvene, and then we would do the next batch of stuff, and then they would go. And then of course we had COVID, which happened right in the middle. So we had, I want to say, at least 6 months, if not 8 months, of absolutely nothing going on because everything was shut down, and production had stopped. Uh, and then that's a whole nother story of like when we started up working again, it was intense, to get that many people from that many portions of the world. You know, I mean, we even did sessions where Baz and Elliot were linked up via, I'm assuming probably either Skype or Zoom or FaceTime or something, but pumped into the studio where they were actually even in our headphones and stuff. Which was crazy. I don't even want to know the amount of technological wizardry that went into making all of that possible.
Yeah.
Makes my head hurt. But it was yeah, I mean, it's like when we were in there working on it, it was certainly all consuming, you know. But it was also a lot of fun. I mean, it was a lot of work, and there were certain things that were really challenging and hard. But we really became a production team, the group of us that were working on it. And, you know, henceforth, you know, after we wrapped on the movie, I mean, it's like we've played on like the War and Treaty's new record and Chris Isaac's new record and some of the Dolly Parton stuff that's coming out this year, and many other records too. You know, like we've gone on to like work as a unit on lots of projects since, and it's just been a wonderful blessing to you know, for all of us, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, I could imagine. And, you know, you mentioned you're a big fan of Elvis, a lifelong fan of Elvis. What was your first
Oh, yeah.
impression when it was announced Austin Butler would be playing Elvis in the movie?
Well, what's funny is I was perplexed at first because we had started work on the film before he was even cast. And there were other people that were in the only one that was connected to the film when we started the very first sessions was Tom Hanks. And there were other gentlemen that were in the running to play Elvis. And there was one other one that we actually worked with and did sessions with, and he ended up not getting the role. So by the time Austin came in to do his first session, which what's funny about it is I learned retrospective, you know, because I'm one tiny piece in the middle of this, you know, 3,000 plus person production, and I'm there to play guitar, you know. So when I met Austin, there was a block of sessions booked, and here's this guy that now we've all already worked together a bunch of, and when I say we, me and the other musicians, Dave, the engineers, Elliot, Baz, and Baz's team, like we've already worked a handful of blocks of session. So we have a rapport. We are joking with each other. We're happy to see each other. And then Austin was just sort of thrown into this environment. And that first day that I met him was the first time I found out that he had gotten the role. And it turns out in retrospect, that was his very first time in a recording studio. And those first few days were actually when we cut the Louisiana Hayride stuff. And, you know, I was first of all, I was, like I'm saying, like I was trying to, get a read on him, and we were all trying to get to know each other. And I mean, my take on it was, he had the weight of the world on his shoulders
Yeah.
in every way at that when I met him, um, and he was kind of drinking from a fire hose, if you know what I mean. Because I'm saying he's got the stress of the role, and he's trying to establish how he's going to do it. He's trying to establish his working relationship with Baz. He's never recorded in a recording studio, and he's in the middle of 15 or more people that already are friends and are joking with each other. So he's like already kind of like a lone wolf. So like he was absolutely amazing, and he was incredibly on it. But at the same time, it wasn't lost on me, like the levity of everything I just mentioned, and obviously he not only rose to the occasion, but blew the ceiling off with it. I mean, I couldn't, it took my breath away. And when I finally got to see the film in its entirety, I was mesmerized by his performance. I mean, it just completely knocked me out. I was like, unbelievable, like he did it.
Yeah, I was the exact same. I'm a bit like yourself. I'm a massive Elvis fan since I was a child, and I used to, with my pocket money, collect Elvis CDs every week. I think by the time I was 13 or 14, I almost had nearly everything he recorded. I was just obsessed. But
that's awesome.
Yeah, it didn't make me very popular now back in the 90s, when grunge and stuff.
But I was the same way. I was absolutely the same way growing up in the 90s. And it was, I liked Nirvana and Stone Temple Pilots and Red Hot Chili Peppers and stuff, but I was so obsessed with Elvis and many other things that were very weird to everyone. So I can relate to that. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was kind of, I feel like for Elvis fans, you kind of claim a little bit of ownership over him when it comes to something like a movie. You're like, oh God, did they pick the right person, stuff like that. But when I actually seen the film, I was afraid to see it. But when I seen it, I couldn't believe how good a job Austin Butler done. And as well, I was actually glad that it was so good, because it's like it introduces Elvis to a new, younger audience, and almost, you could nearly go as far as saying almost restores his legacy a little bit.
Yeah, and I agree completely, and I can, elaborate to a certain extent on that. Baz, every once in a while he would interject and give these beautiful tomes to all of us. He would gather us to tell us about the emotional content of something we were going to work on or something. It was just beautiful. It's like, Baz in his own right is a movie star. I mean, he carries himself like a classic Hollywood movie star. And I've been around some very famous people, and he has a charisma that is very undeniable. And it's amazing to be around and very entertaining. But he would regale us multiple times with basically his intention of that the sort of cartoon version of Elvis that has existed in pop culture does a great disservice to his greatness and is in no way a reflection of his contribution to world culture or America. Just not even American culture, but just America as what America signifies to the rest of the planet. And he says, and he would go on to say that it's like, it is our aim here to showcase why he's so important, and that by the time you get to the portion of his life that has become the cartoon, you understand why it happened. And it's the thing that struck me when I saw the film is, by the time we get to the last portion, you see that not only was, in a lot of ways, it was impossible for Elvis to survive just the entire scope of the trip that he was on this planet. But he had nothing left. It's incredibly sad, and I think that narrative of, sort of showing that humanity of that he literally gave everything he had to give, and then he was gone, is incredibly powerful. And as an Elvis fan, I really am grateful for that, and I think that, and also as a very, very big Elvis fan, I understand the creative license that was taken to construct the narrative. I completely am fine with, because I feel like, even though things are sometimes taken slightly out of order, or they maybe put things in different scenarios, or different locations, or they jam multiple things into one scene, which is what you do in a movie, I feel that the overall narrative of what it portrays Elvis as is achieved by it. Like it's served by it, and yeah, I mean, that's a gargantuan task,
Yeah.
I mean, how are you going to make anyone happy, let alone everyone happy, in a situation like that?
That's it. That's it. Exactly. Right. Final Elvis question. So, have you been to Graceland?
Sure. I've been many times. The first time was when I was 6 or 7, because I begged my parents to take me there, and because I was just obsessed. And I've been many times. And the last time I was there, we were touring and we were playing the venue across the street. That's a part of the complex, and they took us up for a private go, which was as a lifelong Elvis fan, it was an incredible experience. And I can't say that I didn't want to run up the stairs and see us.
I was just going to say.
Yeah, I think I think outside of being a member of the family, that's never going to be possible. Although I think Austin, and I know Baz went up there, but I think Austin was able to go up there with. I think Austin went up there actually with Lisa. God rest her soul. But nonetheless, yes, I love it. It's the city of Memphis as a whole is a huge spiritual home for me. Stax and Willie Mitchell on High Records, and American Sound Studio, and Beale Street and Sun Studio, and Elvis, and all of the hill country blues music that I love, that is essentially just south, literally just a half hour south of Memphis in Mississippi. I mean, it's just that whole, it's just it's one of my favorite places on the planet. So,
and I can't wait to be able to get over there. It's right at the top of my bucket list, and I feel like I have this image that the minute I walk through the doors, I'll have to be dragged back out of there. Like, I'll never want to leave.
Yeah, it's got a smell, and it's got a thing, but luckily you can linger, I mean, like, they don't mess with you really. They're pretty awesome about letting you linger. But it's an incredible place. It's an incredible ground, and I'll be back. We're actually doing 2 nights at Lafayette's Music Room on this upcoming tour that I'm leaving on next week, and so I'll be in Memphis for 2 days, and I'm planning to go do a thing for Elvis Radio with my friend Argo down there. So I'm sure I'll probably for the 4 millionth time, go in, So,
Yeah.
I mean, it never gets old,
Mm. Yeah, I could imagine. Right, we'll dive into your concert experiences. Before we get into your own ones that you've played, as a concert goer, what concerts do you think have made you?
That's a really good question. I think, well, it's not a very famous one by any means, but there was in one of the, if not the first time, one of the first times I ever played in Austin, Texas. I was 16, and I was playing a set at the Saxon Pub, which is a venue in South Austin. And so I played my set, and I didn't really go over that well because I was kind of I was young, and I made all of the youthful mistakes that a young musician makes. And there was a gentleman that was playing after me, and his name was Stephen Bruton. And I'd heard of his name because he had produced a handful of records that I knew of, but I didn't know any more about him. And so I sat down to just watch a song or two or whatever. And he completely, that one night completely changed my life. To give some backstory on Stephen was, he was from Fort Worth. He grew up in the early 60s. He grew up playing with people like Delbert McClinton, and grew up with his lifelong friend T-Bone Burnett, who would become the great producer. Stephen's life was an incredible study in varied musical genres and the highest level of musicianship. He worked with Chris Christopherson and Bob Dylan and Bonnie Raitt and many others. The list is long. And as a sideman, as a session musician, as a producer, and as a songwriter, Bob Dylan even covered songs that he wrote. But he was kind of an under the radar. He was kind of a person that in musician circles, he was as high as you could get, but it's not like he was famous or anything. And he got up and played, and one song was jazz, and one song was like the best slide playing I'd ever heard, and one song was like a country, traditional country, and one song was like, a reinterpretation of an old Lead Belly tune. And it was just completely genre hopping and at the highest level that I'd ever seen in my life. And compositionally, I come to find out that, with the exception of a few, these are all songs he'd written that just blew my mind. And so in many ways, I mean, I look at my life now. Unfortunately, he passed away about 12 or 13 years ago, and I never got to know him really. I saw him play as often as I could. And since, I've become really good friends, and I work with old friends of his a lot. But I never got to know him, and certainly never got to let him know what an impact it made on me. But I look at what I've become, and in a lot of ways, I've become my version of what I saw that night as I look retrospectively, because all the things that I love and all the things that I have my hands in are in a way kind of, it's, that night he inspired a trajectory of what to sort of where the bar should be, and I'm not saying that I've met that, but it's like I've constantly been reaching for it ever since. And so that's probably the biggest single performance concert that I've ever experienced. And I don't think anything else comes close to that.
Yeah, it'd be pretty hard now to come close to that. Jeez. Yeah.
Yeah.
And for any of the listeners that haven't caught one of your shows, what performance-wise, what can they expect?
Well, they can expect to, they can expect me to sort of try and hit all these different things that I like. So there's going to be there's going to be Afrobeat music. There's going to be traditional blues. Not necessarily blues rock, but like there's going to be like a Lightning Hopkins or a, not necessarily one of their songs, but something in that sort of vein. There's going to be probably a bluegrass song that I play either on acoustic or mandolin or something. There's going to be slide guitar in multiple different types of applications. There's going to be some jazz, whether it's somewhat traditional or like completely sort of Bitches Brew Miles or on the corner sort of early 70s psychedelic free jazz, if you will, Ornette Coleman inspired. There's going to be some sort of New Orleans-y kind of stuff. I love the Meters a lot. So there's going to be, probably an instrumental or something sort of in that vein. There's going to be, and on and on, it's just, I like to try and, I like a lot of varied things, and I like to sort of do them all, to the best of my ability. So it's a very relaxed atmosphere in my shows, and there's a lot of true improvisation where there's absolutely nothing planned, and things just sort of happen in a jazz context, if you will. And it's always a lot of fun. I mean, it's incredibly fun for me and my friends that are playing with me, obviously.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's going to be a lot. It's, essentially lots of different types of roots music, I suppose,
Yeah. Yeah. Just that sounds absolutely amazing. I was sitting there thinking, I was like, you know what? I don't think you could get bored. You'd be kind of anticipating what's coming next, and just pure enjoyment. And pre-COVID, you were doing 200 plus shows a year. Have you reached that level again? Is it hard to get back to it?
I don't want to get back to it.
Right.
I don't think it was healthy, and I don't think that it was necessary. And it took COVID to show me that, for all intents and purposes. I mean, I am much happier and peaceful now, going out and doing weeks at a time, and then coming back and, like I said, playing on other people's records, and in some cases producing other people's records and stuff, and the balance of sort of both things that I love. I don't ever see myself doing that ever again. I'm glad that I did it, because you learn a lot through the process of it. It certainly helps. It should help refine what it is that you do. But I'm much more of a 100-ish show a year kind of guy. At this point in my life.
Yeah. And in the past, you've collaborated with the likes of Jack White, Tommy Emmanuel, Dave Cobb, as you mentioned, and you were part of the Grateful Dead founder Phil Lesh's Phil and Friends. When you're playing and collaborating with guys like that, what do you learn?
Oh man, I could talk to you for hours about that. I mean, it's everyone is different. I mean, first of all, there's never a time that you're doing something musical that you don't learn something, or that you can't learn something. I should put it that way, because all has to do with your personality. But every time you play with other people, you can learn something. So, I mean, all of them have different, like, just quickly, I mean, it's like working with Jack, for example, I was very fascinated because I wanted to see what his process was, like how does he make records? And so I was very taken with the fact that we were working completely analog to tape, and it was very chaotic, because we were all we were working at his house studio. We weren't working at Third Man. We were working at his home, because we were working on the Beyonce record, and so they wanted more control over nobody knowing what we were working on. So, like, we were at his house so that there wouldn't be random people seeing what we were working on. And I assume. And so it was interesting because it was like, okay, we would cut the track to tape with lots of sort of lo-fi sounds and things bleeding into everything, and kind of a messy kind of a sound. And then when we got something he liked, it would then go into the digital realm to then sort of be enhanced in like a hip hop fashion. So then all of a sudden the low end, like he would be able to add low end, artificial low end to this lo-fi sound. And it was this interesting sort of, it was just really interesting to see how he was like both working like the thing that he flies his flag for, of like to work to tape and to live and die by a performance and so on and so forth, but then use modern technology in a very hip hop fashion to give it a singular identity that doesn't necessarily make it sound retro. Okay. And that was that, and many other things, but like that was something that I thought was really interesting. Just watching how he sonically would work. Working to Phil is, I mean, it's the purest, like, you can, if your intent is correct, you can do no wrong kind of musical scenario. It's a very, I never was the biggest Grateful Dead fan prior to working with Phil, and working with Phil and getting deep in the catalog and then performing that stuff made me love them, because I understood it in a way that I just was missing as a music fan for all the years prior. I was, in a way, I was being too analytical. It's a joyful, the Dead's music at its core is joyful. It's pure bliss. And I was missing that. I was almost taking it too seriously, I think, as a music fan, where you just lay back and let it happen. Let yourself just surrender to it. And it's just a beautiful ethos. Yeah, Tommy, Tommy Emmanuel is one of the, I mean, he literally will say, it was actually uncomfortable for me, because he will take his guitar out at the gate at the airport and be sitting there playing. It's kind of uncomfortable. Like, dude, put the thing away, man. Like, you're a psycho, but like, the reason he is as good as he is because there's literally never a moment that he's not playing. Like, I've never seen anything remote. I've seen people that are diligent in their pursuit of trying to be great. But I've never seen anyone that even remotely compares to the amount of moment to moment, just laser beam focus on trying to be just what he is, which is kind of top of the mountain as far as musicianship is concerned. Dave has had a huge impact on my life and my family. He's a friend. He's a fellow nerd, if you will. And his strong suit is he casts records so brilliantly. He picks the right people to do whatever it is that is supposed to be done, and then he lets them do their thing. He doesn't wield, some producers will wield power because they sort of feel the need to, whether it's ego wise or whatever. And it's like Dave doesn't get in the way of the music happening, which is why he's so prolifically successful, I think, is because he knows when he needs to gently nudge the ship in a different direction.
Yeah.
He knows how to sort of help bring an arrangement or something together. He has those skills, but he also knows how to just let it happen.
Yeah.
Like, and without spooking the horse, you know. And it's a pleasure to work with him, you know. Anytime he calls, it's a joy.
I could imagine. And, you know, from gigs that you've played, your own performances, is there one that stands out as, you know, like the pinnacle, say the best experience you've had that you revisit over and over?
Not any singular one. There's a lot of them. I mean, well, you know, here, I'll pick one because it just happened, and it was special for multiple reasons. So we have the Ryman Auditorium here in Nashville, which is one of the most historic venues in the world. And I've been very fortunate to get to play there many times. And this last time we were on tour with, well, I say it was every year the Allman Brothers sort of family, spearheaded by Davin Allman, Greg's son, and Dwayne Betts, Dickie's son. They do this tour sort of celebrating the Allman Brothers music every Christmas. And it has a long list of special guests. And I've been fortunate enough to be part of it for several years, myself and my dear friend Luther Dickinson, who I played in Phil Lesh's band with. So this last December, not only was I participating in the show, but I also opened several of the shows with my trio, and one of those was at the Ryman. And I have a 4-year-old daughter, and so she's been backstage her whole life with me, but because of bedtimes and stuff like that, she's never actually seen Daddy work.
Yeah.
So this is also the first time that she ever went to the Ryman. So her and my wife came for, you know, sound check, and she got to play, you know, she was dancing on stage and messing around, you know, at the Ryman Auditorium. And then her and mommy stayed for Daddy's set. And, you know, that was incredibly special for me as a father.
Yeah.
Luther, who was there, Luther has two, me and Luther are very tight. And, when he has two daughters that are slightly older than mine, and they were there as well with his wife. And, you know, there's a whole collective of friends of mine that we're all becoming dads, you know. And so it was just very special because everybody understood, you know, the significance for me. And so like, you know, after the fact, I had all of my, you know, Luther and everybody like sending me like videos that they'd filmed of like my daughter dancing in the wings or something. and it was just something, it was just a real special thing. And it's like, for that to happen at the Ryman, and then coupled with the thing where it's like, the first time I ever did the Ryman, I was almost too nervous to enjoy it. The second time I was a little less nervous. I enjoyed it more. The third time I enjoyed it. At this point, it's like I can literally just walk in there and not be overwhelmed by the environment at all.
Yeah.
I mean, the stage manager and the people, they're all friends of mine and stuff now, you know, like it's a very comfortable environment, and I can just enjoy it for what it is, which is this incredible venue, you know, that sounds amazing and feels amazing to play and stuff. So anyway, I'll pick that one.
Yeah. As a father myself, I completely understand. And out of all the stories I've heard of gigs that stand out for musicians, that's actually the sweetest and nicest one I've heard, you know.
Oh, well, I'm glad. I mean, it's just that thing where it's like, you know, there's lots of ones that like for many different reasons were incredible and stuff I'll never forget, but it's like, that's something that I don't know, man, that's the thing that really matters.
Yeah. Yeah. You may bet when you're, in your older years, when you think back of your gigs, that one will probably be top of the list that you'll remember first.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm sure that, as my daughter gets older, I mean, I'm sure she'll go to concerts there. I'm sure she'll probably be there with me more times, Lord willing. And who knows, if she ends up wanting to be a musician or something like that, she may end up playing there herself, so I don't know. So, but the point being is, like, nothing's ever going to happen to the Ryman Auditorium. It'll be there before, it'll be there longer than I'm here, certainly. So it's something that I know we'll all remember. And she talks about it all the time still,
Yeah. And before we move on to the last couple of questions, then, future plans. Would you like to tell us a bit about the upcoming tour?
Sure. Finally getting around to doing a proper duo tour with my buddy Adam Abrashoff on drums. We sort of, over the last couple of years, it started with, it's an interesting story. I'll try and keep it brief, but it's the very first show coming out of lockdown. There's a historic venue in Tulsa, Oklahoma called Kane's Ballroom, which has been around for over 100 years. And it was the home club of Bob Wills and the Texas Playboys once upon a time. Incredibly historic room. And they had inquired to have me come and play a solo performance there in, I believe it was like November of 2020. So it was like limited capacity. It was the very first show I was going to do. It was one of their first shows they were going to do, trying to do masked, small capacity thing. And I, in my infinite wisdom, went, well, yeah, I can go do it solo. But I was like, why don't I do a duo with Adam? Because we certainly can be a bubble and do it safely. And it's only just one other person. I won't bring anyone else with me, and so on. And they said, okay, we can do that. And so, then Adam and I had to figure out what we were going to do in a duo context, because we'd never done it before.
Yeah.
And it worked really beautifully. It's actually a really fun thing to do, because there's certain material that really translates really beautifully in a duo context, even more so than a trio or a quartet even. And surely there's other material that doesn't work as well, but it's a very free, beautiful, even the jazz stuff works really well in that context. Certainly it's nothing new. I mean, Bill Frisell goes out and does duo stuff from time to time with Brian Blade and other people. But in any rate, so we're doing a month long of that. And then we're slowly starting to announce trio shows. The first couple have just gotten announced, but there's a bunch more coming. And then there's some festival shows, like going back to Peach Fest that we did last year. And then there's we may actually come back to Europe later in the year. We're trying to figure it out, actually, because we've had some offers, and we just need to work out the details. But yeah, I mean, that's basically stretching well to the end of the year, and then I'm very I'm a little bit overwhelmed with coming back, or going to New York, or going to Los Angeles to work on other people's records and things that I'm committed to as well. So yeah, just a little bit of everything,
Oh, brilliant. Bit like the album.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm delighted you said you were thinking of coming back to Europe as well. Actually, I was going to ask that. Would you be coming back? So it's great to hear that you're trying to work that out as well.
Yeah, I think it's definitely going to happen. It might not be a big, I don't think we're going to be able to do a long thing, but I think definitely, because I came over last year a few times to do some strings of festivals throughout Europe and Scandinavia, and that was good fun last summer. So what it's looking like is it's more likely to be something like that, where maybe I come over and just do a smattering of a handful of shows in different places, and then have to get back to the regularly scheduled program over here.
Yeah, I getcha. Right, we'll dive into the last couple of questions. Everybody gets these, I'm afraid, so you can't get off the podcast till you answer.
No, it's fine.
If you could see, I think I know the answer to this one, to be honest with you. If you could see any performer from history in concert for one night only, who would it be?
That's a really good question. There's so many. I think if I could go back and see Miles right before Bitches Brew in a Silent Way era. So like I'm talking probably late 68, early 69. But he's got Dave Holland on bass, and he's got Jack DeJohnette on drums, and he's even got Chick Corea already playing keyboards. But it's just prior to making Bitches Brew. I think seeing him right in that little window, I think if I could pick one thing, I think that would probably be it, and it would probably be they played mostly in Europe in that era. So probably, but I know they did like weeks in London. So I think probably camping out in London and seeing a couple of those would be what I would pick. There's many, many others, but I just the sort of, I don't know, man. Like I just, to feel what that would feel like in a place that holds 100 people would be pretty powerful, I think.
Yeah, but, definitely.
I mean, but honorable mentions go to seeing Junior Kimbrough at his juke joint in the early 90s in Cholahoma, Mississippi on a Saturday or Sunday would definitely be high on the list. Seeing seeing Coltrane at the Vanguard in New York City in the early 60s. Elvis is a weird one because part of me would want to see him, but part of me enjoys the myth of
I've never thought of that before, actually.
But like, like watching That's the Way It Is or Elvis on Tour or something like that, like a part of me likes the myth. But I guess, an honorable mention would definitely be probably seeing him in Las Vegas in either the first in 69, the initial when things were just raw and really, really high energy, or that, early, either the first residency or the August residency in 70 that yielded That's the Way It Is, obviously. But early on in Vegas, I think would definitely, but there's a lot, man. I mean, I would have loved,
it's hard to pick,
to see Ravi Shankar, to see the Allman Brothers when Duane Allman was alive, to see the Clash, in the early 80s, to see Nirvana, to see Funkadelic in their heyday, or Isaac Hayes in the early 70s. The list goes on, man.
It never ends.
But I'll stick with Miles, though. I'll stick with Miles in the Silent Way era.
Good one. Now this next one is interesting. If you had to spend 24 hours locked in a room with any musician from history, who would you be, or who would you pick?
Interesting. Hmm. I think it would be Miles.
Nice.
I think it would be Miles because I just feel like I would learn so much from him. And he was so interesting and he was so fucking crazy too. So it's like it ticks a lot of boxes. But yeah, I mean, or so Miles would be who I would pick who's dead, but I'd pick Ry Cooder for someone
Right.
who's living. I've met Ry twice, and he's so fascinating. Again, he's such an eccentric, but he's so deep and so interesting and crazy. Yeah, I think that it would be. I think it would be incredible, or terrible, or both.
Yeah, you never know. You never know. That's the thing. You want someone who has that little bit of craziness to keep it exciting, because it would be a very long 24 hours, if not.
Yeah, very much.
And the final one. What song would appear on the soundtrack to your life?
What song? Well, several immediately come to mind, but probably God Only Knows by the Beach Boys.
Right. Right.
Because it's just, it's a melody that I close my eyes and want to hear, So yeah, I'll stick with that.
Good one. Good one. JD, listen, I can't describe how much I've enjoyed chatting to you now. It's been an absolute blast. Thanks a million for coming on.
Thank you very, very much for having me. I had a wonderful time too.